ever get that feeling that there's like a whole other layer to life? Something we only just kind of glimpse sometimes.
Yeah, like an undercurrent that shapes what we believe, how we experience things.
Exactly. And today we're taking a really fascinating plunge into the religious experiences of someone, we're calling him Zhang, and we're using this collection of notes, observations. It paints a picture of a pretty unique spiritual journey.
And what we're really trying to do here, in this deep dive, is understand how Zhang's spiritual life actually unfolded over time.
Right.
We want to see how his feelings, the religious ideas he came across, his own practices, how they all kind of mesh together, and ultimately trace that path from maybe passive influence to becoming really actively, deeply devoted.
Yeah, exactly. And to help us sort of navigate this, we're focusing on three main questions. They come straight from our source material.
Okay.
First, how did Zhang's religious experiences actually, develop? And how did he understand them?
Makes sense.
Second, what tangible ways did these experiences actually change his life, like real-world impact?
Right.
And third, how did his own transformation then lead him to seek his own spiritual liberation and then start guiding other people?
Okay, those are big questions. And to really get a handle on this, we're leaning heavily on William James.
Yes.
Particularly his book, The Varieties of Religious Experience. James's core idea, really, was that the absolute heart of religion is that individual personal experience.
The subjective feel.
Precisely, that subjective encounter. And he argued it's more fundamental than, any specific doctrines or church rules.
Okay, so this James sounds like he had a bit of a different take on religion, not just focusing on beliefs, but people's actual experiences.
Exactly. He took a very pragmatic approach.
Right.
He wasn't trying to prove God exists or anything like that.
Right.
Instead, he looked at what religious experiences did for people. How did they feel? Did they fit with how the person saw the world already? Did they lead to, positive moral changes?
But less about objective truth.
Yeah, much more about the subjective impact.
So the key thing here is that for James, religion isn't about, say, church membership or reciting dogma. It's fundamentally solitary, personal.
That's it.
Which immediately makes Zhang's individual journey the main focus, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a really crucial part of James's thinking is this concept he called the unseen reality.
Unseen reality, okay.
He suggested that deep down, we often have this strong sense of something more, something that feels genuinely real, present, even if we can't, touch it or see it with our usual senses.
Like a gut feeling almost, but deeper.
Deeper, yeah. He felt our deepest feelings often point towards something beyond the tangible world.
He actually described that feeling of a more out there.
He did. The exact quote might vary, but the core idea, like our sources point out, is this powerful sense of an objective presence, a perception that can feel even more real, more significant than just, seeing the table in front of you. He knew we might struggle to define this more, but the feeling itself, he thought, was incredibly powerful and real for people.
That's fascinating. So James wasn't just theorizing. He was actually looking at how real people describe these moments.
Oh, definitely. He dove into tons of biographies, autobiographies, even questionnaires from people across all sorts of different religious backgrounds. He was really drawn to these intense, unique religious moments, trying to find the common threads in how humans experience the sacred.
And based on all that research, how did he end up defining religion itself in a broad way?
His definition really puts the individual front and center. That religion is the feelings, acts, and experiences of individual men in their solitude, so far as they apprehend themselves to stand in relation to whatever they may consider the divine.
Okay, in their solitude, whatever they may consider the divine. Very personal.
Exactly. It always comes back to that individual person and their own relationship with what they perceive as sacred or divine.
Okay, got it. And this unseen reality you mentioned, how does that fit into his definition? Is it the divine part?
Well, for James, that feeling of the unseen reality, or what some might call a transcendental reality, is absolutely central to religious experience itself.
Right.
So unseen reality is kind of James's term for that felt presence. Transcendental reality is maybe a broader philosophical term for something beyond our normal senses and reason.
But they're pointing at the same kind of thing.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Both pointing to that something more that goes beyond our everyday sensory world, our phenomenal reality.
So it's not just thinking, I believe X, but actually feeling connected to something bigger.
Exactly. And this is where The philosopher John Hick comes in handy. He talks about the ultimate reality.
Okay.
He uses that as a broad term for the transcendent thing that different religions seem to point towards.
Hmm.
Hick suggests that salvation or liberation, whether you call it enlightenment in Buddhism or salvation in Christianity, can be seen as a move away from feeling alienated towards feeling in harmony with this ultimate reality, even if the descriptions of what that reality is are quite different.
Different paths, same general direction, maybe.
Kind of, yeah. Aiming towards a similar fundamental experience, perhaps.
That helps clarify things, like a common core beneath the surface. So, bringing this back to Zhang, how do we see this idea, this perception of a transcendent reality playing out in his life over these 30 years the sources talk about?
Well, the sources really suggest that Zhang's whole journey is marked by these kinds of perceptions, feeling the presence and the power of the transcendent.
Right.
Over time, he's experienced this something more in ways that have just profoundly shaped his life, his whole understanding of things.
And what kind of impact did these experiences have? It wasn't just a fleeting feeling, was it?
Oh, no, not at all. The sources really highlight that these experiences can trigger huge personal changes.
Like what?
Healing, for one. A deep sense of joy, feeling like life suddenly has real meaning and purpose. A kind of renewed spiritual energy or vitality.
So more than just a temporary high, a fundamental shift.
A fundamental shift in how you see and engage with everything, yeah.
Now, James had some interesting ideas about how this connection to the more actually happens inside us, right? Something about the subconscious.
Yes, he thought the subconscious mind was often the channel for this connection.
It's a gateway.
Kind of. He even played with the idea of a higher spiritual power directly influencing us through these deeper levels of consciousness.
Yeah.
Like our subconscious, or as some sources call it, yuxia yishi, the stuff below awareness acts as a conduit.
A conduit to something greater. Interesting. And the sources also mention this twice-born idea. What's that about?
James used twice-born to describe people who go through this really intense period of inner struggle, maybe pain or division, before they hit this point of profound redemption or liberation. It's a journey from being torn apart inside to finding wholeness and peace.
Okay.
And in Zhang's case, it seems like growing up in a high-pressure family might have created this inner struggle, which then led him to seek solace, maybe guidance, from deities. A way to connect with the power beyond his own limits, you could say.
You can almost picture the internal pressure he felt, making that connection feel really vital.
Absolutely. A real source of solace.
So these really intense personal experiences, seen through James's lens, seem crucial for understanding Zhang.
Let's delve into some specifics mentioned in his life, starting with conversion, this idea of gui.
Right, gui, conversion. The sources explain it's more than just, ticking a box for a new religion.
It's deeper than that.
Much deeper. It's a fundamental transformation of your very self, your whole system for making sense of the world, finding meaning. A deep restructuring.
And Jesus had his own way of understanding this conversion process. It wasn't just suddenly accepting new rules.
No, not just that. He saw it as getting a whole new perspective that then becomes the absolute central organizing principle of your life.
Okay.
It's like religious ideas move from the edges of your mind right into the core, what he called the habitual center of personal energy. The habitual center.
Yeah, and when that shift happens and the new center is religious, that's religious conversion for James.
That clarifies it. Like your whole worldview just reorients around this new core. Now, the sources also mention something about struggling away from sin rather than towards righteousness. That sounds a bit backward.
It could seem that way, but James observed that the experience often involves this deep recognition of your own flaws, your perceived failings.
Right.
So the focus becomes letting go of those negative parts rather than striving for some abstract perfection. And this often leads to feeling you need to surrender to a power greater than yourself, yeah.
This self-surrender seems really key then. Is that something we actively do, or does it just happen to us?
Well, for some people, especially in what James called instantaneous conversions, it feels very passive.
Like you're just receiving it.
Exactly, like you're open, receptive, and it feels like direct divine action. You feel kind of overtaken by this mysterious, powerful force.
Instantaneous conversion. Sounds pretty dramatic. Did James notice any common factors in those cases?
He did identify a few things often linked to them. High emotional sensitivity, for one. A tendency towards actions that feel automatic, less consciously controlled. And being highly suggestible, it's like the person is just more open to these profound inner shifts.
They're vulnerable, maybe.
In a way, yeah. more receptive.
And how does the subconscious that Yuxi fit into conversion?
Well, James talked about the field of consciousness, what we're aware of right now.
Okay.
The subconscious yuxi is like the background noise, things we're not focused on. But during a powerful experience like conversion, that subconscious stuff can suddenly surge into the main field.
Ah,
And that surge can lead to big changes in personality perspective. He even thought higher spiritual influences might operate through those subconscious channels.
So ultimately, how do we judge if a conversion is like real or valuable from James's viewpoint?
By its fruits, essentially. He emphasized judging it by the results, the changes it brings about in the person's life.
If it leads to positive, lasting transformation.
Then it holds genuine value, yes.
It's interesting. The sources mention a difference between how Western research often looked at conversion like fixed stages versus a more dynamic view.
Yeah, Western research often try to map out these typical stages people go through.
Right.
But our sources suggest maybe we need to look more at the ongoing dynamic process, how people navigate challenges, how their faith continues to evolve over time, not just a one-off event.
And how does all this framework help us understand Zhang's key, his conversion?
Well, with Zhang, the sources really stress his high sensitivity both to other people and to this transcendent realm.
Okay.
He apparently often got messages seemingly spontaneously from what he felt was another realm, and he tended to just passively accept these suggestions.
Which fits with James's idea of susceptibility and passive reception.
It aligns quite well, yes. It
Yeah.
sounds like he was very open to those experiences.
So that habitual center of personal energy you mentioned. For Zhang, it sounds like religious ideas gradually just took over that central spot in his mind.
That seems to be the picture, yes. They moved to the forefront, became central to how he understood life,
Huh?
and the sources talk about personal cultivation, zexing, as the active work of transforming that habitual center.
Ah, so it's an ongoing process.
Exactly. Cultivating complete faith, achieving self-surrender, often helped along by mystical practices, maki sinfa, these specific spiritual exercises.
Right.
So James's ideas on conversion really give us a valuable lens to see Zhang's evolving devotion across different stages of his life.
Okay, moving on then. The sources also emphasize yuanli and prayer vow power and quido. Why are vows so important?
Their perceived effectiveness, their lingyan, is just crucial for faith.
If you feel your vows are answered.
It powerfully reinforces your belief. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Efficacy here means seeing sacred power actually show up in your life or your community's life.
Wow. Like through
Prophecies, visions, maybe events that seem miraculous, things that seem to confirm divine promises.
It sounds like in some traditions, like Taiwanese folk religion, there's a really direct link felt between your own well-being and being aligned with divine will.
Exactly right. The sources point out this idea that matching your life to the Shengjizi, the will of the sacred realm, is seen as having a direct causal link to whether you experience good fortune or bad.
But surely trying to grasp the infinite divine with our, limited human minds, that must lead to different interpretations of how this actually works.
Oh, absolutely. Our own values, our priorities, especially how we balance our own small self needs versus the larger self or others, can lead to really diverse, sometimes conflicting ideas about how the divine steps in and what counts as a vow being fulfilled.
Right. And where does prayer, kudao, fit in all this? It's more than just asking for stuff, isn't it?
Definitely. Prayer is seen as a way to achieve things that seem impossible otherwise. But fundamentally, it's about building that direct relationship with the divine.
Fostering faith.
Fostering deep faith that the divine can make a difference. And that faith itself, the sources suggest, can actually activate latent spiritual abilities in our daily lives.
So it's like a feedback loop. We reach out in faith, and that act itself empowers us.
Precisely. Prayer is often called the very heart, the soul of religion. It's that basic human way to connect, to communicate with the sacred. And through prayer, people often feel a really tangible sense of divine presence and power, like an intimate inner conversation.
The sources mentioned prayerful communion. What does that actually mean?
It's described as this phenomenon where something ideal, maybe part of our own deepest self or maybe a higher spiritual power, sort of revitalizes our lives, often through the subconscious.
Ah, the subconscious again.
Yes, it's seen as more proof of the real impact faith can have on our whole being.
And this perspective from Kaijia, seeing prayer as a dynamic spiritual practice, how does that add to it?
Kaijia looks at it through what's called the psychology of practice, Yuxing Zelekshu, basically studying how our inner life unfolds during spiritual practices.
Okay.
She points out 4 key aspects of communicating with the transcendent. First, just being aware of this mysterious other. Second, feeling connected to it. Third, self-reflection, turning inward. And fourth, the importance of consistent daily practice.
So it's a whole internal process, not just the words.
Exactly, a comprehensive internal process.
And the outward forms of prayer, they can look so different, can't they?
Hugely different. Christians might focus on verbal prayer, Buddhists on meditation, Taoists might offer incense.
Right.
But Zhang, his practice seems centered on these mystical practices, Miki Simfa. The underlying human urge to connect just manifests in all these varied ways.
Okay, finally, let's get into this idea of life transformation and the unity of humanity and heaven. Shiming wa hua yo teran ran hei. That sounds pretty profound.
It really ties in strongly with James's discussion of the mind cure movement.
Mind cure.
Yeah, it emphasized how faith and divine power could foster positive attitudes, courage, hope. This unconditional trust, even when facing really hard times.
So the power of belief to shape our inner state.
Exactly. The amazing ability of our minds to affect our well-being through belief.
And James brings the subconscious back in here, too.
Yes, he thought our core spirituality resides mainly in the subconscious. And through that deeper level, we're actually inherently connected, united with the divine.
So reconnecting with that can lead to healing.
That was the idea. Holistic healing, mind, body, spirit, by reconnecting with that divine power within or beyond us.
So our minds have this innate healing potential, spiritually speaking, but it depends on us being open to it.
Precisely. Open to the manifestation of what James saw as infinite divine power. He thought this inner spiritual or divine power was the ultimate source of personal transformation and religious healing.
The sources listed a bunch of experiences. James studied mystical stuff, meditation, self-surrender. What was the overall point about their impact?
He found that all these diverse experiences, which all involved connecting to something sacred, held this incredible potential for healing, for significant positive shifts in personality and outlook.
And this leads to that idea of achieving return and unity with all things through self-surrender. That sounds almost like dissolving the ego.
James suggested our inner being kind of resonates with mystical consciousness.
Resonates.
Yeah, like a response to it. And in those deep moments of connection, we get this profound sense of oneness with the absolute. This unity includes like this passionate emotional opening up. Faith becoming not just belief, but a way of truly perceiving life and moving from feeling like an isolated individual to recognizing you're deeply connected to everything.
So not just feeling good, but a whole different way of seeing reality and your place in it. And this divine spark within us is key to that healing and transformation.
Absolutely. James really stressed how important religious experience is for just human well-being. He saw it as a direct perception of transcendent reality.
Real and authentic.
Yeah, an authentic expression of the human mind, something that can be nurtured through faith, devotion, prayer, and that can pave the way for genuine personal transformation.
And ultimately, what was James trying to achieve with all this study? What was his main goal?
His ultimate aim was really to confirm the reality of religious experience.
To show it was real.
Yes. He believed that through spiritual practice, people could actually realize their own inner divinity, reconnect with their true self with a capital S.
Okay.
And that leads to greater personal integration, inner harmony, higher spiritual growth. He basically saw a personal religious experience as the path to healing, integrating your personality, and deep spiritual transformation.
The sources even brought in Paul Tillich and his courage to be. How does that fit?
Tillich's idea of the courage to be, that basic courage to just affirm your own existence, he argued it's rooted in what he called the ultimate ground of being. He suggested that faith, both as something innate in us and through our active practices, leads us towards unity with something larger than ourselves. It echoes James's themes of connection and transcendence, you see.
Yeah, I do. And James himself had thoughts on how this inner work gives life meaning beyond just our everyday finite lives.
Yes, he talked about the integration and unification of the inner self. He thought that feeling that life lacks meaning often comes from just focusing on our limited, finite existence.
Right.
But if you embrace the infinite, somehow life takes on new possibilities, a deeper purpose.
It's really striking how these different thinkers, maybe from slightly different angles, land on similar core ideas about belief, connection, something beyond the mundane.
It is. And it's worth remembering, while scholars might debate the exact essence of religion forever,
Sure.
the sheer existence of religious phenomena is undeniable. And the study of religious experience itself is becoming much more open, using more diverse approaches than maybe it used to, moving beyond just the paranormal or dreams.
Right.
So yeah, our deep dive today used James's framework, really brought to life by Zhang's personal story, to explore these perceptions of the transcendent and its power to transform. We look at his conversion, the role of vows and prayer, trying to understand his journey of self-surrender towards that return in unity with all things, and his whole process of life transformation.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Zhang's experiences, seen through James's eyes and others, some really powerful themes stand out, don't they? That deeply personal nature of spiritual change, the profound impact of belief, and that ongoing human drive to connect with something, beyond just the material world.
Which really leads to a fascinating question for you, listening in.
Yeah.
Considering Zhang's journey and these ideas from James we've talked about, what might count as a religious experience in your own life, however you personally define that term?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Or maybe, if our subconscious can connect us to a higher power, like James suggested, what does that imply about, well, human potential, about our well-being?
Definitely some provocative thoughts there to mull over. We really encourage you to reflect on your own views on faith, transformation, and that search for meaning we all seem to be on.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.